Hello everyone, this is Syrian, and today we're going to be taking a look at the P-06 sniper rifle. In this video I am using an ELO sight with FMJ and extended mags. My perks are Flak Jacket, Overclock, Scavenger, and Tac Mask. In this video I'll be talking about weapon stats and such, but I'll also be going a little more in depth about the attachments and perks that I find the most useful, and I'll also give some general advice on the way to get the most use out of your P-06. First things first, I do want to remind everyone watching that I do play on PC, where the weapon balance is very different from on console, especially when it comes to the snipers. So if you're on console, please remember that using the P-06 will most likely be a lot more difficult for you than it will for someone on PC. That being said, I have no reason to think that the attachments and playstyles would change too much with this gun in particular. It's just the levels of effectiveness that would change. So, let's get straight into it. On PC, the P-06 is, in my opinion, far and away the best gun in the entire game. I'm going to go into details as to why I think that a little later. Firstly, let's talk some stats. The P-06 does 90 damage per shot at all ranges and has a high penetration value. This is the highest penetration value in the game and puts its wall-banging potential on par with the Shiva, the Gorgon, the Dredge, and all of the other sniper rifles. Within its burst, it fires at a rather absurd 1818 RPM, and it has a very brief charge up time before each burst. It has a burst delay of roughly half a second, and its 90 damage per shot makes it a 2-hit kill, but it is capable of one-shotting if one of your shots lands on the shoulders, neck, or head. This one-shot potential combined with the 3-round burst at a ridiculous rate of fire makes the P-06 absolutely amazing at one-bursting. From a personal point of view, it was my go-to weapon for those try-hard moments when you really need to pull off something special. I have around 15,000 kills with it, and for me it was actually also one of the most fun weapons to use in Black Ops 3. I found something very satisfying about the consistency of the one bursts and the playstyle that it enabled. Needless to say, this weapon has pretty amazing feed potential. Moving on, let's talk about the attachments. In this video, I was using ELO sight, FMJ, and extended mags. However you intend to play, I really feel like the first two attachments are must-haves on this gun. ELO sight is fairly self-explanatory. It gives a much better view of the target for most of the ranges that Call of Duty engagements take place. And I found I really didn't like the scope for the P-06. Not because it's a particularly bad sight, it's just not suited for the types of sightlines I found myself needing to contest on. Call of Duty maps really just don't have the sort of sightlines that make zoomed scopes really necessary. For me in particular, I mainly played Nuketown, so the ELO sight was really the only sensible option. If another sight works for you, then go for it, but I really do recommend the ELO sight over the other options. The only one I would really say is worth looking into is thermal sight, if you want to use smoke grenades, or if the enemies are using smoke grenades, but I think in most situations the ELO is superior unless you're actually going to be taking advantage of it in that way. So, why FMJ, you ask? Well, the P-06 has the highest penetration value in the game, meaning that it can shoot through the most types of objects and walls. That penetration value doesn't do you much good if your bullets don't retain their damage through those walls. That's where FMJ comes in. Combining the high penetration value of the P-06 with the damage retention that FMJ provides just makes this gun absolutely insane when it comes to wallbanging. It's also a great way to ensure you never hitmarker those pesky head glitches in their 2-story buildings. And as if that wasn't enough, FMJ means you'll never need to use a launcher of any kind on your P-06 class. With an FMJ P-06, you can just shred enemy kill streaks. With extended mags, it can take out a Wraith in one clip. It deals with UAVs and counter UAVs in a few bursts, and no score streak in the game will take more than 2 clips to destroy. You can destroy a mothership in something like a clip and a half. The only thing you can't destroy it with it is the Hater, because you can't hit a Hater with small arms fire, but it will take care of everything else in quick time. I really can't recommend it enough. If you're using the P-06, FMJ is simply a must-have. I think I've harped on about the importance of FMJ enough for now, so let's talk about the other attachments. For me, I spent a lot of time playing Nuketown, and as a result, the big ammo attachments were really helpful for me. Using extended mags gives you another 2 bursts, and I found it to be more useful than fast mags. Both are great options though, especially if you play on Nuketown. You can never go wrong with more shots or quicker reloads, because more shots means more time spent in combat and less time reloading. Obviously, if your playstyle is a bit more defensive, or if you tend to play on the bigger maps, you might find extended mags and fast mags much less important. But I would still recommend them on, or at least one of them on, pretty much every map in this game. As for the other attachments, I really don't have a lot of time for any of them, barring Suppressor. I'll talk about Suppressor in a bit, but first let's take a look at why the other attachments really just aren't that good. Ballistic CPU goes right out the window because it prevents you from using an optical attachment. Again, the maps are not so big that idle sway is really a huge problem for the sightlines you'll be usually engaging on. So there's no reason for using ballistic CPU, especially when you consider that you can't use a decent sight with it. Rapid fire is actually quite interesting for the P-06. It has a strange interaction with it because it actually increases the fire rate by a rather insane value of 66%. That's right, it makes it increase the rate of fire by 2/3. So why do I not bother using it? Well, because it unfortunately only increases the rate of fire within the burst, rather than shortening the delay between bursts. So it will bump your fire rate in burst all the way up to 3157 RPM, but the time it takes for you to fire another burst will remain the same. The increase from roughly 1800 RPM to over 3000 RPM, it isn't completely worthless, but it does mean you don't have to stay on target for as long, but it really isn't enough to justify an attachment slot for it. My advice would be to try it out for yourself, see whether the increased rate of fire within burst is actually helpful to you, and choose based on that. I really can't recommend it though. Moving on to stock, and just like on every weapon class barring the SMGs in this game, stock really isn't that useful for sniper rifles in Black Ops 3. While aiming down the sights with a sniper and no stock, your movement speed is reduced to 40% of its normal value. With stock, this value is increased to 60%. Now, from a purely mathematical perspective, that is quite a big increase. But in practice, it's really not very helpful. The way I see it, stock or no stock, you're never going to be able to strafe fast enough to avoid enemy fire. The 60% move speed value also drops back down to 48% the moment you start firing, making it even less useful when you actually get into a gunfight. So stock is something of a useless attachment for snipers in my opinion. I just want to put those numbers in perspective so people know why I think it's not worth it. Comparing it to an SMG, when you aim down the sights with an SMG in Black Ops 3, your movement speed gets reduced to 80% of normal, twice as fast as with a sniper. This value drops to 76% when you start shooting your SMG. Now, adding stock to your SMG puts your movement speed value to 104%, both while shooting and not shooting. That's right, if you ADS with an SMG, you can strafe and shoot and be faster than if you were just walking around normally, if you have stock. Needless to say, it's a lot easier to avoid enemy fire with a stock SMG than with a stock sniper rifle, and adding stock to a sniper rifle really isn't going to help you outstrafe enemy fire. In my opinion, you're much better off just going turret mode and trying to gun people down on long sight lines before they can land enough shots to kill you. The P-06's ridiculously low time to kill really helps a lot in that regard. Finally, let's talk about Suppressor. For most guns in Black Ops 3, Suppressor is actually quite a big no-no. It tends to give huge penalties to effective damage ranges, and it's really hard to justify using it on all but a select few weapons. Happily enough, the P-06 just happens to be one of the weapons you can use suppressors on. The sniper rifles in Black Ops 3 are unique in that suppressing them actually has absolutely no effect on their damage or range. Suppressor or no suppressor, the P-06 will be a 2-hit kill at all ranges, with a 1-hit kill to the head, neck, and shoulders. Obviously, it's up to you to decide just how much you value staying off the map. One thing to be aware of is that the P-06 is quite a loud gun, even with a suppressor. So while you'll be staying off the minimap, don't go assuming that people won't be able to hear you. And I know that's always been the case for suppressors to some extent, but it seems particularly loud with some of the guns in this game, P-06 included. So, that's that for the attachments. Let's move on to perks. And like my previous guide, you can be pretty flexible with your perks in Black Ops 3. I was using Flak Jacket, Overclock, Scavenger, and Tac Mask in this video, but it's really important for you to tailor your perks to the game type and the game situations you find yourself in. If you're playing objective game modes like a Domination and Hardpoint, then I'd say Flak Jacket and Tac Mask are an absolute must-have. But one of the great things about the P-06 is that it actually has tons of spare ammo, so you don't tend to run out of ammo very quickly. If you don't tend to go on particularly long streaks, you can quite easily do away with Scavenger. For me personally, I love running Overclock when I can get away with it, because I love my Purifier so much, but that mainly has to do with the fact that the Purifier is so damn overpowered on PC, and the fact that I play on Nuketown so much. If you're someone who really doesn't get a ton of use out of their specialist stuff, for whatever reason, then chances are there are much better choices for you as far as perks go. I really can't go too much more into perks with this gun, since it is quite perk independent. So let's move on to some of the basics of P-06 use. The first thing that might throw people off is that charge up delay. Obviously, it's really important to get the timing down right, but I found it to be quite intuitive. The gun is very, very forgiving with its one bursts, and you can usually kind of swipe your aim across someone as the gun's charging. It's a little bit hard to explain, but you'll get used to it fairly quickly if you just use the gun for a few games. As for playstyles, in spite of its fast rate of fire in burst, it's not a great weapon in close quarters, as you could imagine, especially if you're relying on hipfire, so you want to keep close quarters engagements to a bare minimum. As you would expect with a sniper rifle, it excels, at long ranges, but it's also amazing for medium ranges as well. If you're on PC, you'll be able to annoy the hell out of assault rifle and LMG users because they just won't be able to compete at their weapon's preferred range. And a good P-06 user should be able to comfortably outperform a Draken user of similar skill level in one-on-one engagements because of the P-06's faster time to kill. I think the biggest thing to get the hang of when using the P-06 is pre-firing, and I really can't stress how important it is to pre-fire when you use the P-06. Obviously, just like any other weapon, you want to be pre-aimed when you round corners or when you have reason to believe someone is about to enter your line of sight. But the P-06 in particular is balanced by its charge-up time, so pre-firing helps eliminate this drawback, and that is what turns the P-06 into such an absolute menace. Whenever you go to peek a sightline, you really want to pre-fire it more often than not, particularly if it's a high traffic area. It will take a little bit of practice to get the timing right, but trust me, it's very, very worth it in the long run. So, to do a quick recap, must-have attachments are ELO sight and FMJ. Fast mags and extended mags and suppressor are all very useful, but not as important as the first two. The other attachments are fairly useless and quite hard to justify using for various reasons. Perks are very flexible, basically use whatever you want, but be aware of what your playstyle and what the game type demands. You want to keep nice long sightlines, but you're more than capable of aggressively pushing at medium ranges if that's the playstyle you prefer. With the P-06 you can wallbang incredibly well, and you can shred streaks incredibly easily. Just remember to pre-fire when pushing sightlines in order to eliminate the charge-up time factor in gunfights. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope I've provided some insight, and I hope to see you all again soon. See you later, everyone.